Hey you guys, this is Sunny and today we discuss how to have fully immersive sensual pleasure. I love this topic. As you can see from the smile on my face, I just love this topic because I love pleasure. Feels good to say that out loud to myself and also in the public domain. And why do I say this? Because you and I are hardwired for pleasure. Who says this? Well, there's a ton of scientific researches that are there available. You could Google them. It might take you a few weeks to go through all of them, and you will realize that it is true that we are, after all, hardwired for pleasure. Now, apparently, there's a growing interest in this field of research, and incidentally, the people who are funding these researches are the ones who are also interested in selling you stuff. Big bucks, I must say. What it simply means is that as long as you are in pain, they can keep selling you painkillers. It doesn't really matter what the painkillers looks like. It could be a gadget, it could be fancy cars, private planes, clothes, food, you name it. As long as you do not understand what pleasure really is, you are an open market for them. And unfortunately, that is really a huge amount of our population right now. We we are overexposed to different kinds of pleasure, but we do not know how to have an immersive experience of pleasure ourselves. And that is why it's really important to pay attention to this subject, to talk about this thing openly in society, at dinner tables, um, and everywhere, even including at work. This is something which is really important because, after all, you are hardwired for pleasure. Now, when it comes to pleasure, there are two kinds of people that I come across that I'm sure you may have seen them too. One group of people tend to abstain and they go to the one extreme of avoiding pleasure, which is impossible in many ways, but let's say they just go that side. And the other group go to the other extreme of overindulgence. So this one group which goes towards extreme avoidance tend to become bitter. That's what I have seen in my experience. And the other group which goes into overindulgence soon reach the edge of boredom. And here's what happens. If you notice them, and if you've been there yourself, like if you've been like most people, you may have experienced this in some part of your life. I have. And I've seen many people still go through this. I talk to clients, they are swinging like this. So people who are in extreme boredom then tend to start moving towards abstaining to the point where they go to the other extreme, and then they get bitter, they get tired of that, and then they swing back again to indulgence, to overindulgence, extreme indulgence, and then boredom. And many people swing between these two extremes for many years. Sometimes their whole life gets spent this way. And swinging to these extremes is just waste of energy, because there is always a middle path to wholesome pleasure, to immersive pleasure, to deeper pleasure and newer experiences of pleasure, instead of just swinging on the extremes, experiencing the same thing over and over again. So if you've seen something like this, if you can relate to this, do drop a comment or drop me a message. Let me know that this made sense to you. Okay, I know that this will click with a lot of people, because this is something which I have seen so often in so many lives. Now, when we talk about sensual pleasures, obviously you guys know that it is not just about sex, guys. Okay. Yes, it is a part of it, but when we say sensual pleasures, it is made up of senses, 5 senses. Pleasure that we experience from our 5 senses. And let's talk a bit about what goes on behind the scene. And I'm not going to go into too much of scientific depth here, but just going to give you some background. When we talk about 5 senses, The signals are picked up by our five senses, but they are processed with our nervous system, right? So, what's the connection? What powers the nervous system and the senses? What links them is your attention, where you pay your attention, okay? And interestingly enough, your attention can be directed using your senses. Now, let me give you an example of this, okay? A lot of people say that they are foodie. I love food. I'm a foodie. Yeah. And then they will be eating food with their phone on one side, a newspaper on the other side, a fat book on one side, or maybe, Netflix in front of them. And yes, they may be eating exotic food and experimenting with different kinds of food, but that does not make them a foodie. A foodie is someone who would just go for the immersive experience itself. So for me, when I look at someone, a simple person like a yogi, sitting with very basic food, he may just be eating his dal chawal, that is a rice and lentil soup. He might just be having a much deeper and immersive experience of pleasure because he is directing his attention through his senses on the full gustatory experience. So what he is doing is he will just shut down every other distraction in his world and he will bring all his five senses on the food, which means the attention is completely on the food and he's having a much deeper experience. So how to do this? How to slow it down? Now here's where I'll give you an exercise you could try and give it a shot. Let me know if this works for you. Let's take the example of food, okay? Since we're talking about food, and food is something that most people can relate with immediately, and obviously for which I will not be getting banned or on Facebook. I can't be using the word sex again and again, right? So anyway, food. So if you're eating your food, no matter what it is, you could be sitting with an apple or just your regular meal. If you could take away all distractions first, okay, clear off your table, take away anything that would distract you, and focus only on the food. No phones, no books, no newspapers, no magazines, no TVs, nothing. Just you and the food. Okay. Now I understand if you have jobs, if you're traveling outside, if you're in sales or service, I get the point that you may not get a chance to do this while you're at work. But I'm sure that in at least once in a day, you could sit with something, if not food, then maybe a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. Anything, just if you could sit with that one thing for just by yourself without any distractions. So that's number one. Number two, slow down. Okay, breath is energy. So if you could slow down your breath and just maybe take a couple of deep breaths, slow down. So you're just retaining your energy with you and then dive into the experience of eating food. Okay. Now, number three is where you can play around with different combinations of your senses. Okay. What I mean by this is your attention is the energy which is flowing out of your senses, right? One of the most powerful sense that human beings have is the sight, visual sense, because of the lot of neural connections that we have with our sight. Okay. When you close your eyes, you cut down on the attention that is going out of your eyes and you retain it back inside. All right. So let's say you're sitting with your food, you're taking a good look, you're engaging all your five senses first. So you're looking at the food, you're smelling it, you're touching it, you can hear the sound of the food as you move it on your dish, and you're about to taste it, right? So you're just engaging fully with it. And after you've taken your first morsel, your first bite, you can just close your eyes. When you do that, you cut down on the energy going out of your eyes and being retained inside. Now, the excess energy, which is a high amount of energy which goes through your visual sense, what will happen to that? It will get redistributed in the four senses. And if you have more energy in your other four senses, guess what happens? You have a much deeper experience of pleasure than you have experienced before. Now, this might give you some idea as to why some people have kinks about, um, blindfolding while doing funny things in bed. It has a scientific reason. There is a reason why they do that, or even plugging earplugs while they are doing things. It's again the same thing. It's retaining the energy inside so that it gets redistributed to the remaining senses and there is a heightened sense of pleasure. So these are very simple things. Anyone can do this. You can do this right now. Okay, time taken to learn this skill is the very first time you do it. Time taken to master this skill is a whole lifetime, which is a great thing, right? You never will run out of learning new things in this field of pleasure. And number 3, time taken to realize that you have come a long way might take a few weeks, few months, few years, depending on where you are at right now. When I'm working with my clients and I'm helping them with different areas, trauma, low self-confidence, and all of these things, I also embed this skill set in their mindset, in their mind, in a matter of 2 days. They walk away knowing that they have this skill set because that's the power of hypnosis. We do it in a state of trance. So check this out, try it out for yourself, and stay in pleasure, guys, because after all, you're hardwired for pleasure. Have fun. Thanks so much for being with me today.